aboard and welcome to Inside Minneapolis.
And welcome to Inside Minneapolis. I'm Phill Lindsay. In this month's edition, we're going to take a look at some of the housing and transportation issues along the Hiawatha Corridor in South Minneapolis. Now, from 1887 to 1892, the Hiawatha Corridor was known as Fort Avenue. This was what led from Fort Snelling all the way into downtown Minneapolis in those days. Before we begin the program, though, 10-year-old Megan Volkman is going to read from Longfellow's poem, The Song of Hiawatha. We'll see you inside.
Song of Hiawatha by Henry Longfellow. By the shore of Gitche Gumee, by the shining Big Sea Water, at the doorway of his wigwam, in the pleasant summer morning, Hiawatha stood and waited. All the air was full of freshness, all the earth was bright and joyous. And before him, through the sunshine, westward toward the neighboring forest, passed in golden swarms the past the bees, the honeymakers, burning, singing in the sunshine.
Well, and that was just a short reading, a little excerpt from Longfellow's famous Song of Hiawatha. Once upon a time, of course, just about every school kid in America and around the world knew about that poem. And of course, that was based right here in what we now know as Minneapolis, the Mill City. Well, my next guests here on Inside Minneapolis are two people who certainly know a lot about things that are going on in Minneapolis, and in particular, a certain intersection along the Hiawatha Corridor. We're going to talk with these two folks about sort of the greater Hiawatha Avenue, Lake Street intersection. And with me are Iric Nathanson, project coordinator at the MCDA, colleague of mine, and Caren Dewar with Midtown Community Works. And actually, Caren wears a number of hats. She's a bit of a juggler, I think. So thank you both for being here. In talking with folks and doing a little research for this segment, it became very obvious that the intersection, that area a little bit on either side of Hiawatha at Lake Street, is full of history. And Iric, you and I have talked a little bit about some of the origins of this part of town and some of the great employment centers there. Could you just talk a little bit about what old-timers might remember?
Yeah, well, much of the neighborhood south of Lake developed after World War I, and during the 20s, 27th and Lake was really sort of the commercial heart of this area, which would really be southeast Minneapolis. Actually, technically, southeast is another neighborhood, but this sort of the southeast quadrant. And there are many residents that still remember the days when everybody went shopping down to 27th and Lake, to the shoe store, to the department store, to the grocery store. That was an era before most people had cars, so you would walk to the commercial center. And it was a very vibrant commercial district, really up through the World War II era.
Okay, and then one of the fascinating stores that was there was Freeman's.
Mm-hmm. Freeman's department store was viewed as the Dayton's of South Minneapolis, and it was established at 27th and Lake in 1932. It had been at a previous location, and it was a real landmark up through the 50s, owned with a gap by the same family, the Freeman family, who was actually related to the governor. And former Hennepin County Attorney Mike Freeman, so there's interesting family connections.
Indeed.
And the neighborhood was very heavily Scandinavian, and I interviewed the son of the founder, and he said, well, the Scandinavian people in South Minneapolis were very thrifty, and they knew a good deal, and we had to respond to that need. So it was interesting how Freeman's positioned themselves as sort of the value store of the era. But time took its toll, and
shopping trends changed when people went out to strip malls. And
Freeman's closed in the early 70s when discount stores were coming in, and just didn't work.
Well, and there's some changes that are happening contemporaneously in that area, but before we talk about that, a little bit further to the west was Minneapolis Moline, which was a major employer.
Yes, that's now where the Target store at 27th and Lake is now located, and Minneapolis Moline has a long history. It was really sort of the economic heart of the neighborhood, and many of the people in South Minneapolis worked at Minneapolis Moline, which was a tractor company.
Right, and as I recall, it employed thousands in its
Thousands
heyday.
of people. Mhm.
Yeah.
And when that closed, that site was redeveloped for what's now the Target.
Well, in a moment, let's get to some of the contemporary changes that are going on. But Caren, I want to ask you a little bit too. Midtown Community Works. This is a major initiative that really has a much broader scope than this particular intersection. Could you just, for our viewers, just define a little bit about what the effort is you're involved with there generally?
Well, Midtown Community Works springs out of Hennepin Community Works, which is an effort to build off of infrastructure improvements and use them as economic catalysts. Midtown Community Works is a very exciting public-private partnership that includes the mayor, county commissioners, city council members, the Metropolitan Council chair, and 14 top-level executives of our major employers in the corridor. We're focusing all of our energies, all the public agencies and the private sector interest on development opportunities, infrastructure improvements, public realm improvements. It's very real estate focused. The idea is what are some things that we can do together to integrate all of these various things that are happening in the corridor so we end up with exciting places that are worthy of our affection.
That sounds great. So it's if you will, kind of a reinvestment in a certain part of town. Is it geographically determined?
Actually, it's the entire corridor from end to end, from city edge to city edge. So you're starting with West Calhoun, the Gateway, and all the way to the river.
Very exciting. It sounds like you've assembled a lot of heavy hitters to take part in this. Yeah.
Right.
Well, as we get closer into this particular area that we're exploring today on this show, you've been involved with things, I think, the YWCA, which is a major thing. Can you, for folks who aren't familiar, this is a major development going on here.
Love to talk about the YWCA. The YWCA came out of a planning effort in the Seward neighborhood 5 or 6 years ago. And someone said, you know what we really need is a health and fitness center here. What about the Y? It was just one of those moments, I will never forget it. We are now under construction. It's a $21 million facility. It will be up and operating in the summer of 2000. It's in partnership with the Minneapolis Public Schools. It's going to be a state-of-the-art community center, including an enclosed field house for school students to use during the day.
And the nearby school is South High.
And that was one of the reasons why we located it there, so that we'd have the access to the public schools. At that time, we did not know that we were going to be on the first light rail line in Minneapolis.
Oh, so that's just serendipitous.
That's right.
Oh, that's great.
Right.
Oh, we should describe to people where this is, where the new facility will be.
It's between 21st and 22nd on Lake Street, right next to South High and next to Edison, which is another new development, and across the street from where the new Green Institute is going to be.
Absolutely, yeah, the Green Institute. We're going to make reference to that a little bit later. So. This, you say, started with an idea where Seward, now it actually kind of hopped across the street there. There's a lot going on in Seward as well. Is there anything you can share about kind of on the southern end of Seward there as it gets down towards Lake Street and Hiawatha?
Right.
I know there's still some property available for development there.
Well, there's the industrial work that Seward has been very active. And then Seward also right now, because of the light rail line, is very engaged in a planning process with Phillips in terms of the light rail stop at Franklin and Lake Street. So, Franklin and Hiawatha. So we have some real opportunities to link the Franklin and Hiawatha and the Lake and Hiawatha intersections.
That sounds exciting.
So.
And Karen's old group, Seward Redesign, is actually helping with the redevelopment of the former Freeman's department store. So that links up to sort of modern times. That building now has just been sold and will be redeveloped, and Seward Redesign is helping with a planning study to figure out what are the best uses for that building.
Currently known as the Padani's building.
Currently known as the Padani building. Freeman sold it to Padani. When the Freemans owned it, was called the Coliseum building, and the new owners will be restoring the old name, so it will now be renamed the Coliseum building.
Isn't there a ballroom in there with
There's a ballroom
Coliseum
on the third
ballroom?
floor.
Yeah.
Coliseum ballroom, that's right.
Creative folks going
So history sort of continues up to the current day, and we're, I think, trying to build on the history of the area while we've got these exciting new projects going on.
Sure, keep the infrastructure.
We don't lose that sort of urban fabric that we have.
Very important. Well, Iric, I know that there's some other planning efforts that have been going on. There's the Minnehaha Corridor, which Minnehaha, for folks who aren't familiar, really just runs parallel for a good stretch of Hiawatha. There's that one, and you said something about the Minnehaha Mall?
Yeah, the Longfellow Community Council has just commissioned a study of the Minnehaha Corridor all the way from Minnehaha Park down to Lake Street, and that's an area that's sort of a mixed commercial residential with sort of small scale commercial scattered along what's basically a residential corridor. So it's a real mixed use with the industrial area backing up just behind it. And the study is an effort to try to pull out the aspects of the Minnehaha corridor that need to be developed and enhanced. And the study talks about some new housing development, concentrating commercial, some design standards that'll sort of tie the corridor together. So for the neighborhood, Minnehaha corridor is an important focus for this area.
You know, as we're sitting here talking, we're going to be able to call up on the television screen here a little montage of some of the old enterprises and businesses along this stretch of Hiawatha at Lake Street. So just a little montage while we're sitting here and talking. Iric just mentioned something that actually might be kind of a challenge, and that is, this is an area that is, I guess it'd be zoned with, there's industrial, there's a lot of commercial, there's residential. Does this pose some special challenges in this particular area? Of course, a major transportation
well,
corridor?
again, we can look at challenges or we can consider them to be opportunities.
Sure.
I think one of the things that we lost when we lost the streetcar line is we lost a major infrastructure improvement that was tying everything together. Iric just mentioned that this Minnehaha work is the effort is to tie it all together. Midtown Community Works is about tying it all together. We're going to be embarking on a major land use study of a half-mile radius around Hiawatha and Lake, so that we can take these various initiatives like the YWCA and Edison School and South High School and think about how we can knit them together, strengthen the pedestrian connections, think about how we can get across what is a pretty significant barrier right now. Hiawatha and the underpass is tough for pedestrians to negotiate, but what we know is that those places that are vibrant, those places that draw people, have a mix of uses. So it's really figuring out how you can knit together housing with jobs, with retail, with entertainment. It's how all of those things piece together. And I think at Hiawatha and Lake we have just a fabulous opportunity that has emerged really in the last 3 years. 3 years ago, Edison School was not there. The YW, as I said, is just under construction.
It was just an idea at that time?
Green Institute was still trying to figure out how to raise our money. We had no, we'd have a light rail corridor there.
And folks were looking to sell, but buyers hadn't come in on some of the other properties.
Well, Pedani's has been for sale and sitting there for years and years and years.
Sure.
So these kinds of things can actually act as catalysts for other things to happen, but in order for the development pattern to occur that you want to occur, the real challenge, Phil, is how you get all of the various interested parties to be working together.
Singing on the same song sheet.
That's exactly right.
That's right. Now, Iric, I know you both work for the city as a project coordinator. You also happen to live in the Longfellow community.
I do live in the Longfellow community. I shop just this morning. I stopped at the Cleaners on Minnehaha Avenue at 31st. I go to the bicycle shop on 36th in Minnehaha. I go to the nursery on 42nd. So, I mean, the people in this area, use this as their main street. One of the challenges we have at 27th and Lake is that we have sort of a 1960s suburban style shopping center with huge parking lots right next to sort of a more historic urban streetscape where brick buildings are coming right up to the curb.
Yes.
And how to sort of knit the 60s style shopping center with an urban fabric is going to be a real challenge. Now, one of the buildings in that shopping center is just now going to be changing owners, Minnehaha Mall, which is right next to the Target, and we hope that as Minnehaha Mall is redeveloped, there'll be an opportunity to sort of tie it in a more rational basis to the surrounding commercial area. So that's another issue that's right in front of the neighborhood right today.
It sounds like another reason to think of Minneapolis as a dynamic city. It's never stopping and it's changing. So, Caren, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good overview.
Thank you.
Iric, thanks for being here. Now we're going to take a look at another brief montage. Hiawatha Avenue, back as we mentioned earlier, once upon a time was called Fort Avenue. So we're going to take a look at some images lengthwise through the corridor of some of the businesses and enterprises that were here once upon a time. Stay tuned, you're watching Inside Minneapolis. Well, I have to say, one of my favorite features of Inside Minneapolis is looking at the wonderful photographs, and a special thank you to Sherry Nolan, who's our researcher, and goes out and through various sources grabs those. So I hope you enjoyed just a few images here along the Hiawatha Corridor. Another feature we do in this show is what we call What the Heck Is That?, where we select some object, some part of reality out in Minneapolis that a lot of people maybe know what it is or know where it is, but they don't know what it is. So we go out and we ask folks, what the heck is that? And then, of course, for our viewers, our loyal viewers here on the show, we always make sure to give you the right answer. So I think you're looking right now at an image of this month's What the Heck Is That? And we'll clue you in a little bit later. My next guest is actually extremely appropriate to have talking about one of the major issues that's going on in the Hiawatha Corridor. Caren Lyons, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for asking.
Well, it's a pleasure. And you are with the Metropolitan Council,
Yes.
where you are a planner. And we're going to talk specifically about transportation and related issues along the Hiawatha Corridor. But for folks who maybe have heard of the Metropolitan Council but don't really know what its charge is, could you just give us a brief overview? What the heck is this Metropolitan Council?
Okay. Well, Metropolitan Council is charged with planning the orderly development of the region of the 7-county metropolitan area. And as part of that, we set out a vision, a long-term vision for the region. And it's encapsulated in the regional blueprint. And then we have a transportation plan that is part of the regional blueprint. We are proposing in the blueprint and the transportation plan a series of dedicated transit ways within the entire metropolitan area. And the first of these transit way corridors will be the Hiawatha Avenue light rail transit line.
And that's where people like yourself come in, because this has to fit in not only from the city of Minneapolis's perspective, but the entire metropolitan area. You mentioned 7 counties, so you really have a large charge there.
Yes.
So professionally, you have, I'm assuming you personally have a sense of what's going on in these 7 counties. And now, very specifically, how the heck are we going to make this, this is the first effort, isn't it?
This will be the first dedicated transit way in the region. We will be preparing a regional plan for transit ways by February of year 2000 to identify which of the other transit way corridors would go next in the region.
And how those would then fit in with this one.
How they would interface with the Hiawatha LRT. Up until yesterday, we didn't know if we had a full state funding commitment for the Hiawatha Light Rail Transit.
Oh, this is the recent legislative,
Yes.
And then of course the governor has to sign that. And
the legislature came through with the leadership of Governor Ventura and Ted Mondale, the Metro Council Chair, and Al Tinklenberg, MnDOT Commissioner.
Right, and of course that then puts the region in the running for some very necessary federal money.
Yes,
in competition with a lot of folks.
Puts us in a much better position to be able to access the federal funding for this project, and we hope to have the go-ahead by late this year, early next year, with regard to Hiawatha.
Yeah, any project like this is extremely complicated. I mean, in some ways, the Hiawatha Corridor, from Minneapolis' point of view, is like a 50-year project. I mean, there was talk many, many years ago about it as a highway corridor, as I recall, and that was changed. And of course, now the idea of light rail transit has come in a big way. What, if I may just ask, what is the great advantage to light rail transit versus other modes of transportation?
Well, light rail transit, in conjunction with a good bus system, which we have today.
Metro Transit.
Yes, Metro Transit and other operators in the region can really help revitalize the region's transit system by capturing more riders. It offers another alternative. Light rail transit is perceived of as a high quality, higher speed, higher amenity type of transit that can be used as a shaper of regional transit, generate ridership, and also be used to as a development and redevelopment catalyst.
Right, it plays a big role in the surrounding land use.
Yes.
Well, let's talk about that in a moment, but as long as we have this map here, which really outlines the Hiawatha line, could you just very briefly kind of walk us through at least some of the major components of
Yes.
what this is, and just to orient people, the blue line here obviously is the Mississippi River, downtown Minneapolis, up at the top left of this map. But Caren, if you wouldn't mind, just kind of walk us through.
Yes, there will be 4 Minneapolis downtown stations from Hennepin Avenue to the Metrodome station. And then it will stop at Cedar Riverside, Franklin Avenue, Lake Street, 38th Street, 46th Street, and Minnehaha Park. At that point, it goes south to the Mall of America, and it has an additional 8 stations, starting with the Medical Center at the VA Hospital, the GSA, Fort Snelling, where there'll be the first major park and ride lot that interfaces with the line, and it will reach the Lindbergh Terminal in a tunnel underneath
So
the
that's
new
been determined
airport.
then?
Yes.
I know that was an issue that had to be resolved.
It will stop at the Hubert Humphrey Terminal, Northwest Airlines, and then at 3 stations in Bloomington, and finally ending, at least in this stage, at the Mall of America.
Right, and again, not every specific parcel has necessarily been identified as to what's happening where, but the route, the line is defined.
Yes, preliminary station locations and platforms for the stations have been identified at this point, and we've gotten a lot of great community involvement and ideas with regard to the placement of those station platforms.
Well, that's right, and another big part of what you have to do is work with both the public agencies, and there are multiple layers of that, but also with the communities. Can you outline how folks have had a way to get involved with communicating their aspirations for this on a community basis?
Sure. The authority for the Hiawatha LRT corridor rests with a corridor management committee chaired by our council chair, Ted Mondale, and it has city and county leadership on the corridor management committee. They seek advice from a community advisory committee that has members from Minneapolis neighborhoods and all the areas around stations to advise the corridor management committee about such things as station location, platform design, design of the system. How to make it really pedestrian friendly is a major opportunity and challenge for the Hiawatha LRT.
Well, you make a good point, because it's not only about hopping onto this new kind of streamlined light rail transit mode, but there are pedestrians. I believe, is there a bike path that will be associated with this?
Yes, there will be a bicycle trail running alongside the corridor to and reaching to Minnehaha Park. There will be a series of pedestrian connections that we have to talk about and make investment in, and we're working with the neighborhoods and the cities and the county to try to figure out how to make access to the stations the most friendly environment possible, and then really help enhance the community, the livable communities along the corridor here.
Right, and again, that kind of dovetails back to this notion of what's the best use of the land around this. It really becomes an opportunity for all kinds of folks, the neighborhoods, the communities, business people, and I even believe public artists are quite interested in perhaps adding some value to some of these stops as well.
Oh, absolutely. The communities along the corridor are very excited about the opportunities that the stations will bring them, both from enhancing the pedestrian environment, from the development opportunities and redevelopment opportunities that the community would like to see happen, and also public art that can reach out into the neighborhoods and reflect the neighborhood character. We do see transit ways, light rail, commuter rail, and bus rapid transit as a means not only to improve the transportation infrastructure and ridership, but also to enhance the communities in which they serve, either from redevelopment, reinvestment, channeling of growth, a portion of the region's growth to those station areas, but also to revitalize the communities through which these stations go.
Could you, and this is a very speculative question, and I'm not asking you to be specific as to one particular stop here, but could you give our viewers just an idea of the kinds of things that might develop around one of these stops? I mean, kind of a prototypical idea. I mean, are we going to see more stores maybe, or more residential density around them? For someone who doesn't know the issues, it might be interesting to hear what the vision might be.
It will vary by station. For example, in downtown Minneapolis, We expect to see 44,000 new jobs by the year 2020 that are within a quarter to a half-mile walk of the 4 downtown stations, and a lot of new housing units, possibly at least 5,000 new housing units in downtown Minneapolis to make it that 24-hour livable city. Right. Bloomington is expecting 33,000 new jobs in the form of entertainment, office, and hotel directly adjacent to the stations. Developments equal to the size of the Mall of America to serve the stations.
And if I may just briefly interrupt, I believe I've read somewhere that the Mall of America is the most visited tourist attraction in the country?
Yes, yes.
That's astounding.
And so we're already serving major concentrations of employment in downtown. We're going to be able to serve downtown development much better, Bloomington development much better. The areas north of Lake Street in Minneapolis, Lake, Cedar Riverside, and Franklin Avenue neighborhoods are very excited about the redevelopment potential that might be coming with LRT. It can serve as a catalyst to reshape the urban form, the structure of the environment. In the 38th, 46th, and Minnehaha Park Station areas, there might be less development, but over time you might see more housing choices for people who choose to stay in the neighborhood.
Keeping within the neighborhood framework
yes, within the context. Yeah. Housing is particularly attractive to a rail line, but also where you have big employment concentrations, hotel, office, and service retail that's complementary is very attractive to the station.
Sounds like a nice mix there. We have just a moment left. Brief timeline, when can I hop over to Hiawatha and get on this thing? I suppose it's a shifting schedule, but what's the estimate?
Well, MnDOT, who will be constructing the line under the guidance of the Corridor Management Committee, expects to have it up and running by year 2003, and that's when Metro Transit will take over the operation. We may have segments of it open as early as 2002, so that we can do some trial and test runs and give the governor a ride.
I like that. That's very good. Well, it sounds like a challenge, but a great effort. Thank you very much. Caren, nice to have you here.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Well, coming up is our feature called Did You Know? There's some very interesting things that have happened historically along Hiawatha Avenue. Stay tuned for this. You are watching Inside Minneapolis. Well, I have an old friend, Hugh Amo, who lives in the neighborhood, who has told me stories when he was young of going over to that zoological garden there. Started many, many years ago by Robert Fish Jones, so I'm glad we had an image to look at there. If you've just joined us in Inside Minneapolis, we are sitting in a house currently under construction along the Hiawatha Corridor, and that's an appropriate place for us to be because my next two guests are here to talk about the tremendous success of some housing initiatives that have gone on here. Bill Koncak,
Hi.
Project Coordinator with the Minneapolis Community Development Agency, a colleague of mine, and Michael O'Connell, who is representing Timbercraft Homes, which is one of the developers who's had great success here. I wanted to start with you, Bill. Not too many years ago, along the Hiawatha Corridor, there was sort of an odd-shaped, zigzaggy parcel of land here that was undeveloped. But folks like yourself knew that homes could be built there. Could you just give us a little overview of the thinking that went into that, and then a little bit of the history of the housing?
Sure. We began the project in 1990. The land was originally cleared in the 60s for a highway or freeway out on Hiawatha Avenue, which was stopped. We purchased the land in 1990 and began the process of the replatting and rezoning of the property. That took about 2 years worth of work in conjunction with the neighborhoods. There were 3 neighborhood groups at that time that were involved. Then starting in about 1993, we began the marketing of these properties. The very first one was built by a nonprofit building corporation. At that time, it was questionable the values that could be achieved, and they sold for $78,000 the first house with public subsidy. And now, as we're getting to the end of it, after 65 single-family homes, we're in the $150,000 to $200,000 range and no public subsidy.
That's a tremendous success story right there. And in not very many years when you talk about it.
No.
The first home started going up in 93?
And
Yeah.
now we'll be finishing up before the turn of the century.
And just refresh my memory, you said how many houses total?
Approximately 60 single-family homes. There's also some infill that have been made available adjacent to the properties.
Oh, okay.
So we've had a total of about 65 new homes in this immediate area.
And as I understand it, all the lots are basically sold.
Everyone is sold at this time. There are about 3 that have yet to start construction, but all the lots are now sold.
So again, a very good success story. And the neighborhoods were involved in what, some planning issues and design questions?
Yes, all the developments by the MCDA are reviewed by the neighborhood, and they make a recommendation regarding the design. And they've been very active in all the neighborhoods as we've been working on it. We've also, again, had the 40-acre study, so this has been a long-term relationship with the neighborhood.
A lot of citizen participation.
Absolutely.
And in a word, they're pleased with the results?
On a whole, everybody seems to be very
I mean, on a
satisfied.
major project,
Right.
you'd probably always get a few voices on
Always
the
somebody
margins.
would like it done slightly different,
sure.
and some people wanted to see a green space, but that just wasn't to be.
Yeah,
They wanted
the
development.
particular site here, I suppose, issued some challenges for that kind of thing.
Well, many people, after 30 years of vacant, they're used to having it as kind of a kid's
I
play
hadn't thought of
area.
that, sure.
And so they were used to walking their dogs and doing things like that, but
Yeah.
it has to be developed.
Higher and better use.
Absolutely,
arguably,
especially
sure.
with the new LRT stations. And
Yeah, which we were just talking about with Caren Lyons,
Right.
about the great opportunity for some land use development along this transportation corridor. And Michael, you're with a company that helped pioneer this effort here. For folks who aren't familiar, can you just briefly describe Timbercraft and what your company does?
Well, Timbercraft has been in business for about 15 years. It's a general construction company. Our primary emphasis is in remodeling and insurance restoration work. And as a division of Timbercraft, we started a new home division and have worked closely with the MCDA over the last 3 or 4 years in South Minneapolis, and had a working relationship with them for the last 10 years prior to that in Northeast
all right.
Minneapolis.
Okay, so Hiawatha wasn't the first shot here in terms of working with the city.
That's
and
correct.
Things like that. What was it that kind of piqued your interest? And I'm speaking as a business and perhaps you as a person. What piqued your interest about this particular stretch of Minneapolis? What made it seem like an opportunity?
Well, you know, we were approached by the MCDA back in July or June of 1996. And Peter Marlowski, John Marlowski, and myself came down and toured the property and realized its proximity to Minneapolis and saw that there's, you know, its location had held a great opportunity, at least in our estimation. We sort of stuck our necks out. We built a home that everybody told us was crazy for us to build because it was overpriced for the, you know, the existing neighborhood. Basically, at that time, we were looking at bungalows and story and a halves in this particular neighborhood that were averaging in the $80,000 and maybe $90,000 price range. And we started out with what we thought was a floor plan that suited today's buyers' needs, and worked closely with the neighborhood association, and the sale price of that home was $130,000. Wow. People thought we were crazy for trying to start that initiative, but what ended up happening is that 35 homes later, you know, we're in that price range of anywhere from $125,000 up to $190,000, sometimes approaching $200,000.
Clearly market rate. I mean, that's right in there with folks looking anywhere else in the area.
That's correct.
Now, did you mention how many? 35, about 3 dozen?
That's correct.
Right in this corridor?
Right
here?
in this corridor, correct.
Wow. Who are your customers? Who's coming in and looking at your homes, the Timbercraft homes, and saying, yeah, we'd like to live there? Are they coming from the suburbs, other part of Minneapolis?
They're primarily people that have lived in South Minneapolis for a good portion of their life, or they've grown up in South Minneapolis, and their families were, you know, expanding, and they realized that they found housing opportunities that can meet their needs. The biggest difficulty I think we have in Longfellow and Standish Erickson is the fact that it's a great first-time home buyers market, but for people that want to remain here, a lot of times the housing stock is not big enough for their needs, and that's what we provided in new construction. Were completely usable basements with egress windows for family rooms, additional bedrooms, bathrooms, 3 to 4 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, attached and detached
What you're
garages.
describing is really more of a contemporary consumer desire for certain kinds of features in houses.
That's correct. That's correct.
And Bill, maybe you know this. My understanding from the folks that I grew up with that lived in this area, a lot of what we think of as South Minneapolis heading out towards the airport was really built, right after World War II?
After World War II, south of 42nd Street is
South
very
of
common.
42nd Street, okay.
So-
And then I think Iric Nathanson earlier was saying as you get up closer to Lake Street, after World War I, really. So a lot of that housing stock goes back a ways. And of course, those don't always match today's consumer needs or interests. Well, Michael, you were nice enough to bring with a site plan here. Now, can you just describe to us what we're looking at here and maybe where it is? I'm assuming Hiawatha's over here on the right side.
That's correct. We've entered into a agreement with the MCDA, and we're going to be developing 6 triangular pieces of property that are located along the Hiawatha Corridor. And we've worked quite closely with the neighborhood associations with our design layouts and front elevations and floor plans. And basically what we're going to be offering are, in our first phase, are 12 detached townhomes that will feature a private driveway to access the front doors of these properties.
Oh, I see. Okay.
But at the same time, the neighborhood group wanted to make sure that it retained a lot of its flavor and character of the neighborhood. So we're using then alley access to, for the loading of the garages off the rear of the
Kind
homes.
of back of the house?
That's right. And as you can see, the berm along Hiawatha runs in this particular area. And what we're trying to do is prevent a sort of a streetscape that is heavily greened, a lot of shrubbery, and a lot of nice trees and landscaping to go along with the home sizes that will range anywhere from 1,500 square feet to almost 2,000 square feet. And that's finished square footage without the basement being included. You can add, if the basement were to be finished on these homes, you can add approximately another 800 to 900 square feet on these homes.
Well, that's very healthy. I mean, that's a good-sized home.
We're really excited about the project.
Well, it looks like what you did is you took a site here that had some idiosyncrasies and really made it personable and rather charming here and solved some problems and turned it into a great thing.
Well, that's what our goal was to try to do. I mean, we did have some site limitations in regard to the berming and the use of Hiawatha along the east side of the property.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then we tried to, take the charm of the neighborhood, which is basically single-family detached homes, and for a townhouse association, they'll take care of the responsibilities of the snow removal and the lawn care. But you can see here that each one of them does have their own private lot, and each one has their own, their own yard. In addition, they're single-family units, so they're not the common cluster type of home that's 6 or 7 units under one roof.
Great. We're going to take a brief pause right now and go down the block as we're sitting here off Hiawatha. A couple doors down, Bob and Greg Tehar developed, as I understand, Bill, they developed their own house. They built their own house. And very charming people. And we're going to just take a quick visit and take a peek in their house and hear from them. So we'll be right back.
I am Greg Terhar, one of the homeowners and designers of our home located at 4253 33rd Avenue South in Minneapolis. And we designed the home to look like a lot of the homes in the area. We chose this neighborhood for its mature trees and proximity to all the parks and lakes in Minneapolis.
Well, it was nice for them to invite us in and see their particular house. And Bill, as I understand it, these gentlemen actually have done a couple of projects in the community.
Yes, they originally were living just off of Lake Street in a home that was built, and they are both have a CAD/CAM design operation out of their home, and they designed their own home this time. They wanted with their special needs in mind and for long-term use. So they've put a lot of money into a lot of special detailing, as you saw in the photographs.
Exactly, and you've mentioned that there are a number of homes in this corridor that were built with special needs in mind.
A total of 15 will be developed that are for special needs people. There was one small development on one of these triangles right off of Lake Street that has 7 units that were for people with spinal cord and head injuries. And so there have been a large request for this special needs housing, and it's being filled. So we've seen a number of units that have like mother-in-law's apartments in the basements, so they can help with
for
family
caregiving
of elderly parents. So
that's very good work.
We've seen a real mix of housing available.
Well, and speaking of the mix, in addition to the good work and the leadership that Timbercraft has provided, can you just name maybe a few of the other developers that have helped pioneer this effort?
Okay, the first developer was a nonprofit building corporation. Again, we had used construction subsidies. That was the Greater Minneapolis Metropolitan Housing Corporation, or GIMIC. They built 14 houses. And then from that point on, it's been basically for-profit developers. It's been Timbercraft, John Pastuck, who's built in this house,
in this particular
and
space.
he's built 8 houses. There have also been McDonald Construction and a number of other firms that have been hired by individuals that have the home built for them.
good
They
point,
bought
sure.
the lot and then had another contractor come in and do it.
So good partners, all of these.
Absolutely, and we have 2 lots, or 2 houses that are going to be constructed by the Minneapolis Public Housing Authority, which will be handicapped accessible families
Part of that.
for very special needs people. So it's a real
nice mix there.
of society.
Great. Well, Bill, I want to thank you very much for being here and sharing a little bit. And Michael, congratulations. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Very nice. Well, we'll be back in just a moment. And as Bill just mentioned, we are in a home that's being built by Natural Homes by John Pastuck. He's our host, and we're going to say hello to him for just a moment. And we'll be back. You're watching Inside Minneapolis.
I'm John Pastuck. My company is Natural Homes by John Pastuck. We're in a house I designed for a customer in Minneapolis. It's based on Frank Lloyd Wright principles, prairie style specifically from the 1920s. We feel that it fits in well in the city with the older houses, but it's an updated style. And that's where we are.
Well, thank you, John. It's always nice to be inside, literally inside something that's going on the sites that we're covering here in Inside Minneapolis. And my next guest is a gentleman who knows the city very well because he's a planner for the city of Minneapolis. Daryl Stokesbary.
Hi.
Pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
Daryl and I have worked on a couple of things over the years.
Yeah.
And you were the supervisor. You're the planning supervisor.
Yep, I was promoted planning supervisor about a year and a half ago.
Which essentially means you crack the whip on a number of people there, right?
Yeah, I have about 8 community planners that work directly with me and for me, and in terms of the different projects that they have.
Right, and I know the workload in your department, and,
it's unbelievable.
It's big. For folks who maybe don't know, what does a planning department do? I mean, you don't just sit around and make plans.
Right. I guess what the planning department attempts to do is to look at the city as a whole and try to develop policies and perspectives about the past and how we got to be where we're at right now and then into the future. So we look at trends and analysis, and we identify changes that we think might happen, as well as then we look at opportunities for what we would like to have happen into the future. We now have a Minneapolis plan that starts with community building as a sense of how do we get people involved with their government and with their neighborhood and with their environment that they're in.
Again, the citizen participation.
That's correct, yes. So we start with that part of it, and then we go into a markets chapter, which identifies how the economic development and the housing in the different parts of downtown, as well as the commercial areas around, like Hiawatha Corridor and Minnehaha Corridor, fit into this whole puzzle. Because we're trying to make this an economically viable community and provide opportunity for individuals. And then we get into the infrastructure and the public facilities chapter, and then the community form, the city form, in terms of the street grid pattern that has historically been developed, as well as the density issues, as well as the other kinds of development opportunities for historical perspective.
Right, the urban design, the urban geography comes into to play here. And you're mentioning this plan, which is a multi-year effort to put that together. And then also the zoning comes through your shop as well.
Yeah, the planning department actually has a zoning section, which is called regulatory services. That then we also have the community planning perspective, which is the section that I'm in charge of, and that has historic preservation. And then we have a research section, and I believe that there's also a graphics and a supportive services
connection there,
section.
to help, because you folks work with a lot of plans and maps and the like.
Correct,
and I have to say, and correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the things that I've most admired about the city of Minneapolis, and this goes back historically, is that compact Central Business District.
That's correct,
And
yeah.
that had to come through some serious planning efforts, what, a couple generations ago?
Yeah, actually, when Larry Irvin came to town, I think that would have been 1958 or even maybe before that. One of the principles that he held was that a compact downtown was very, very important for maintaining its competitive edge against the new developments that were beginning to occur.
Spinning outside the city limits.
Outside of the city, right. And so we really work very hard as a compact. I think another principle is accessibility. And that's the ability for people to move in and out and for goods and services to come in and out. And that's how this Hiawatha Corridor fits into this.
Well, and that's a perfect segue there. That's exactly right. You educated me that historically, Hiawatha Avenue, which I've also learned once was called Fort Avenue, was a major route for one of our major industries.
Yeah, well, it was the old grain to farm to market road. And so it's a grain road that came into downtown. Actually, Fort Snelling and that whole vicinity down there was one of the first areas developed west of the Mississippi River.
Good point.
And it goes up, I think they call it the old Fort Road into St. Paul, West 7th Street. And then Hiawatha was the other direction that came on into, and actually the grain elevators lead into the Mills District, into the downtown.
Yeah, a lot of folks think of the mills down along the riverfront, which is historically famous. But again, right over our shoulder here, you can see some of these mills, Harvest States there, and a number of others. ADM, I think.
And the railroads obviously led them right on.
Right, snaked right along in there. Well, and now you're getting to what I found as we were preparing for this discussion, a fascinating thing that, you know, as a lifelong resident around here, I tend to look at Minneapolis sort of from the inside out. I live in Minneapolis, I work downtown, I know you work downtown, and I tend to think inside out. But at the same time, folks that are coming to this area, whether they're flying into the airport or they're crossing over the Mendota Bridge, they come down to that Fort area, and that's a tremendous nexus of all kinds of transportation modes. What are some of your impressions of what that part of our city means sort of metropolitan-wide and for Minneapolis?
Well, actually, I think it's a gateway to the city of Minneapolis. It always has been an entry point. I mean, coming across the Mendota Bridge when it was built, and I think it was put together in the early teens or the 20s when it was first developed, and people used to walk back and forth across that bridge. And there wasn't a lot of access into that geographical area. The airport was down there, the old Fort Road, but there wasn't as much access as we had hoped. Now, in the more recent past, 494 has been completed, and the Mendota Bridge was rebuilt. So that whole area in Mendota Heights and Egan, the East Egan area, that's all really beginning to develop.
And we tend to take that for granted now, but that river gorge down there, that wasn't that easily passable.
No, that's correct. Geography didn't work very well. And that area, if you look at a residential density map, you'll see that that area of Mendota Heights and in that vicinity is really underpopulated. So this is a growth area for us. The other thing is Minneapolis in the Minneapolis plan tries to place Minneapolis in the context of the region as a whole. We're the major central city. And so this is an entry point, just like Lindale Gateway on the other side is an entry point into downtown. We want to celebrate that, so when they get into Minneapolis, they'll know that they're into a central city, and that they have good accessibility all the way downtown. They're not going to get lost.
That's right.
And then the Hiawatha Corridor right next to it is a commercial and residential corridor that we're looking at improvements to.
Yeah, it has more of a neighborhood feel because of the residential.
Yeah, so they're going to be servicing the residents in this area. We hope to be able to grow the city in the next 20, 25 years, and this is one of the corridors that we expect that to happen.
Well, and talking with you and Karen Lyons from the Met Council earlier about the opportunities for land use development along each of these particular stops, it's a tremendous opportunity for the city.
Yeah, and I forget what the total number of housing units that we had hoped, or households that we had hoped to achieve in this area, but it's above 1,000.
Really? Additional?
Yes.
Wow,
yeah. There's going to be a stop apparently at 50th, and then at 46th, 38th, Lake Street.
I'm glad you have these memorized, because I don't have them all in my head.
And then at Franklin and Cedar. Yep. And then it goes into 5th.
Right, and then right into the downtown.
Right, and the downtown, we're getting interest in the downtown developers because they see this as a real opportunity for people coming in and out for work around the Dome
Okay.
as well as over the North Nicollet Mall area.
That's right. And it's the last stop actually right over in the warehouse district.
That's correct.
So
Yeah.
all those become
Yeah.
opportunities.
Yeah.
Actually, it's interesting as long as we're talking about that part of town. You've mentioned Gateway, and I tend to think of this stretch down here by the Crosstown and Highway 55 as an unofficial gateway because it's never been dedicated.
That's right.
That way. But of course, the historic gateway is down by the river in downtown where people kind of came over, from St. Anthony
That's
into
correct.
the fledgling
Yeah.
city of Minneapolis.
Yeah, and on the other side of Hennepin Avenue Bridge, that beautiful bridge that's down there.
And that is sort of the official, the gateway.
That is the gateway.
But it's a little misleading in a way because that's right now in the heart of town.
Yep.
And so for folks who are coming in, as you say, from Mendota, and I think, and folks that are flying in, they're coming in for business or to visit aunt and uncle or whatever.
Yeah.
The airport, you hop on there, and then it's the Hiawatha Corridor.
That's right. And it seems to me like in that general vicinity, there's really a good potential for development of aviation type of businesses, high-tech businesses, and different kinds of businesses. We talked about residential, but I think we're probably going to have more residential around the commercial corridors and the commercial nodes, and we'd like to see the population increase in those geographic areas. So, because we want the buy-in power, et cetera, to be close to centers of activity.
Sure, well, that makes sense. Again,
Yeah.
thinking as a planner.
That's right.
That's
And
good.
out there, it's already, first of all, it's noisy, and there's fairly large tracts of land. So we think that an industrial use and commercial associated with import-export businesses and other kinds of
With
flight.
the international airport
Yes.
there.
Yeah.
And one of the things, and it maybe goes without saying, but Hiawatha is this direct shot into downtown.
That's
So it
correct.
almost doesn't matter at what point you're there.
You can't get lost.
You can't get lost.
Right.
It's a straight shot right
Yeah.
there. Well, Daryl, I wanted to maybe pull back just a little bit because one of the things that I think of when I think of planners, and I use this term, it's an unofficial term, but you guys think long term, 20 years at a stretch like that. When you think about the Hiawatha Corridor and this area we're talking about down here, kind of in the airport, Vets Hospital, and the fort, in your mind's eye, what do you envision? How do you see that? You mentioned more housing maybe in Mendota.
Yeah.
What do you think the greatest opportunity is, or maybe the biggest challenge in the next generation?
Yeah, I'm very interested in making job opportunities occur along this route. But I also see it as being housing. So housing and jobs, and actually that fits. The Hiawatha was more industrial, and I'd like to see some of that continue around the grain elevators and in that vicinity. But where we have transit nodes, I'd like to see housing, alternative forms of housing developed for people who don't want to stay in their single-family homes, and also be close in association with their shopping and the services that they need. Another thought that I had is, there's Minnehaha goes right down to the University of Minnesota. I don't see why there couldn't be a good marketing strategy for student housing or for students to move and to live in that area. Generally, because we're a central city, we bring in a lot of people that are new to the area. They stay for a little while and then they move on to other places. But with the job opportunities and with we still keep a lot of those people.
We retain.
And so, we retain a lot of those people. So if we are able to bring students in and show them that this is a good corridor to live in, a safe area to be associated in the city, and that there's job opportunities, I think we would be able to use that as kind of the move-up market into our single-family homes.
Interesting idea.
And so I think that I would like to see that occur. But I still think we need jobs. Jobs are very important for the city residents.
I mean, all the other things are really a means to that end.
That's correct.
As it were. Well, related to that, and here we were talking kind of 20 years out or however long, what do you think the near-term effect on the surrounding neighborhoods will be? I mean, in talking with other folks, it sounds like it's a good opportunity.
Yeah.
What do you think it'll mean for these planners that you're working with who serve the local neighborhoods that adjoin Hiawatha?
First of all, I think they're going to have to realize that there probably will be some change that occurs, different forms of housing, new development, etc. I mean, these houses right here are pulling up the values of the neighborhood already.
Which is essentially a good news thing, but it changes the dynamic.
It changes, that's correct, that their taxes will probably go up because of that, but that's good news. That's one thing I think. The other thing is I think that more and more they're going to be able to have access to the transit facilities that are
Great
close
service.
by. There's going to be improved services. And so maybe being able to get downtown and to do different things in different parts of the city will be improved. At
Daryl,
least we hope so.
Sounds like an exciting time to be a planner.
Yeah.
And to maybe live around the Hiawatha Corridor.
Yeah, it would
Sounds
be.
good. Daryl, thank you very much.
Thank
Pleasure.
you. You
That's
bet.
great. Well, now stay tuned. We're going to do our What the Heck Is That feature. And we got a few answers that weren't quite right. So let's go and listen to a few of those answers to What the Heck Is That?
Looks like a foundry of some kind.
I haven't the slightest. Looks like an old prison.
School? I think it's a new beach house for Lake Nokomis. Looks like some kind of old Roman baths or something.
So we didn't get either Paul or David on him.
I don't know.
A hotel?
A strip mall to be?
Ooh, a new school.
A school.
It's probably got something to do with green earth or something, I don't know. Oh, I think it will be a build, what is not ready to build, yeah, a house. And it could be perhaps a hotel or an office.
Is it a kind of garage?
I think it's an old building that's going to be renovated.
I'd just say it looks like some kind of a jail or some kind of penitentiary, I don't know.
Well, tell you what, let's now go and get the right answer from Michael Krause as to what the heck that is.
Thanks, Phil. My name is Mike Krause, and I'm the Executive Director of the Green Institute. And behind me is the Green Institute's project, the Phillips Eco-Enterprise Center. The Phillips Eco-Enterprise Center is a 64,000 square foot office and industrial facility built on this site, which was once planned for a large garbage transfer station facility. It's going to bring about 150 jobs to the Phillips neighborhood, and it's really going to be a model green building in the city and really the state and in the entire region. We've tried to incorporate a number of innovative energy and environmental strategies, things such as a ground source heating and cooling system, daylighting of all of the areas, some solar and wind energy technology, reuse of materials, and the tenants themselves will all be from the same environmental and energy sector. So we're really excited about what it's going to do for the neighborhood, especially with some of the other things that are happening here with the Midtown Greenway on the north edge of our site and the LRT line on the east edge of our site in the Hiawatha Corridor. Thanks a lot, Phil.
Well, thank you, Michael. I hope you enjoyed this month's edition of Inside Minneapolis. We had some fun. Next month, we're going to go down to Lake Street and take a look at some of the tremendous developments all the way from the lakes to the river in Minneapolis. 29th Street Corridor, Lake Street, a lot of things going on down there. Now, at the end of the show, we have a catalog of useful resources, so you might want to take a few notes. And paired with that is an interesting image of the old zoo down at Longfellow Gardens. And of course, at the end of the show, along with those important credits, we have another interesting image, and that's a streamlined passenger train that was known as the Hiawatha, and it was stopped there at the Minnehaha station. I'm Phill Lindsay. We'll see you next time on Inside Minneapolis. I gotta go help and do a few finishing touches.